Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are looking at a text so incredibly powerful that its author, Virgil, actually asked for it to be burned when he died. Literally burned. Thankfully for us, it survived because we're looking at his monumental 2,000-year-old epic poem, the Aeneid. But listen, we are not going to read this as just some dusty tale of ancient adventure. No, we are going to extract its true essence together. Because this text, it is actually the ultimate modern playbook on purpose, on leadership, and on the agonizingly painful cost of building something much larger than yourself. If you've ever had to sacrifice something you deeply loved for a long-term goal, or if you've ever felt the heavy, heavy weight of people depending on you, you are going to find this absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's dive into this. The entire journey we're about to unpack hinges on this single monumental question. What does destiny actually cost? You know, when we think of destiny or leaving a legacy, we almost always just think of the glorious outcome, right? But Virgil forces us to look at the intense, messy, human stakes of actually getting there. Building a future, creating an empire, or even just steering a modern organization towards some grand vision. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is purchased with enormous sacrifice.
To really understand how our hero, Aeneas, navigates these massive stakes, we have to grasp the engine driving this entire explainer. It's this core Roman virtue called pietas. Now scratch whatever you're thinking, because this isn't just about being pious in the modern religious sense. Pietas means a profound, unyielding duty to your family, to your community, to the gods, and to your destiny. It is the heavy, relentless burden of constantly sacrificing your own personal wants, what feels really good right now, for your much deeper long-term responsibilities.
So, here is the chronological and emotional journey we are taking today. Aeneas doesn't just start out as some glorious founder, he actually starts as a refugee. His past is the completely destroyed city of Troy. His present is just filled with wandering, brutal storms, and a super crucial stop in Carthage. And his future, the destiny he is absolutely sworn to achieve, is laying the foundation for the Roman people in Italy. He literally has to transition from a traumatized survivor of a fallen city to the founder of an entire new civilization. Section 1. Escaping the ruins. So, thrust yourself right into the burning ruins of Troy, where Aeneas has to make a life-altering choice. He doesn't just run away to save his own skin. He escapes by physically carrying his elderly father Anchises on his back, all while leading this small, terrified group of survivors into exile. He is literally carrying his history and his people out of the flames. Troy is gone. Aeneas cannot rebuild exactly what existed before. And think about how powerfully this applies today. A long-term relationship might end, a career could completely disappear, a business might fail, or a previous identity might just no longer fit. One of life's absolute hardest transitions is accepting that you can't live in the past, and you can't perfectly restore what was lost. The lesson here isn't to erase your past. It's to take the values and the essence of what actually mattered and use them to build what comes next. What's just incredibly powerful here is how this totally reframes human suffering. Aeneas endures the devastating loss of his home, his wife, his friends, and eventually his father on this journey. So how on earth does he keep going? Well, because his suffering is deeply connected to something larger than himself. When you're going through a really difficult season, it becomes so much easier to carry if you can answer this one question. What am I building through this? Purpose does not magically erase your pain, but it gives that pain a direction and a meaning. Section 2, the burden of leadership. Let's look at what it means to carry the future. As Aeneas moves forward, his responsibilities drastically evolve. He isn't just a lone warrior trying to survive for his own sake anymore. He's become totally responsible for an entire displaced people who are looking directly at him for survival and for a future. The crucial point here is the shift in his internal dialogue. Ordinary people, and honestly even a lot of epic heroes, operate on the question, what do I want? But true leadership, the kind that actually builds lasting legacies, demands a totally different question. What do the people depending on me need? Making decisions based on the needs of others rather than your own personal desires is the defining and, let's face it, often exhausting characteristic of true leadership. Which brings us to Section 3, Love versus Mission, the Carthage Dilemma. This intense tension between what Aeneas wants and what he must do reaches its absolute breaking point in Carthage. Here, Aeneas meets Queen Dido. They fall deeply, passionately in love, and for a time, Aeneas just stops wandering. He's ready to stay. But the gods intervene, basically tapping him on the shoulder to remind him that his destiny is in Italy, not Carthage. Dido offers Aeneas security, romantic love, power, and a place to finally stop all his painful wandering. But staying means totally abandoning his ultimate mission. The emotional implication here is profound. The absolute hardest choices in life are very rarely a simple, clean battle between good and evil. They are usually between two genuine goods. Love is good. Purpose is also good. But when they pull you in completely opposite directions, the choice creates immense grief, even when the decision you make is totally justified. So, Aeneas chooses his mission. He leaves Carthage, and the result? Dido is absolutely devastated and eventually takes her own life. Virgil gives us this incredibly uncomfortable warning right here. Duty should not be romanticized. You can fulfill your public duty. You can make the exact right decision for your long-term goals, and it can still carry an enormous, devastating personal cost. True maturity means accepting that sometimes doing what is necessary still hurts people. This builds directly into a really powerful understanding of resilience. Aeneas experiences repeated, crushing losses, but unlike other ancient heroes who might throw a massive tantrum or let grief totally consume them, Aeneas models true, gritty resilience. Resilience means grieving quietly. It means you absolutely miss what was lost for sure, but you do not let that grief permanently halt your forward movement. You carry the sorrow, but you continue to build. Both can be true at exactly the same time. Section 4. The Price of Destiny. Moving into the brutal war in Italy. Strengthened by a vision of Rome's future greatness that he actually receives down in the underworld, Aeneas finally reaches Italy. But his arrival doesn't bring some immediate peaceful golden age. It brings brutal war. He faces intense resistance, specifically from a local prince named Turnus. We are now at the climax of the story, staring directly at the harsh reality of what purchasing the future actually requires. Large ambitions always have hidden costs. Virgil forces us to reflect on our own goals here. When we aim for something massive, the question isn't just, can I achieve this? A much more mature leader asks, what will achieving this require me and the people around me to sacrifice? Because a goal isn't automatically noble just because it's big. The means, the toll it takes on the way there, matter deeply. And this brings us to the shocking, super abrupt ending of the epic. Aeneas defeats his rival, Turnus. Turnus is on the ground begging for mercy, and Aeneas, who has been defined throughout this whole poem by his careful restraint, actually hesitates. He seems totally ready to spare him. But then Aeneas sees that Turnus is wearing a prophy, a belt taken from Aeneas's dead friend Pallas. In a sudden, blinding fit of rage, Aeneas loses all his self-control. He kills Turnus. Boom! And the poem just ends right there. It leaves us with the deeply unsettling truth that a lifetime of discipline can be totally unraveled by a single emotional failure, proving that real strength requires continuous self-mastery. Section 5. The Ultimate Founder. Let's look at how he forged his identity. Stepping back from that sudden violence, we really have to look at the broader moral implications of Rome's founding and how Aeneas fundamentally forged his identity through this grueling process. He completely transforms. He begins the story defining himself entirely by his inherited identity. He's a Trojan, a survivor of a fallen past. But through sheer responsibility and action, he transitions into a constructed identity, the founder of a future Rome, a future, by the way, that he will never personally live to see. He proves that your most important identity doesn't have to be limited to just where you came from. It should be forward-looking, built entirely by what you choose to take responsibility for. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why Aeneas is so incredibly unique among ancient heroes. It's a massive aha moment. Think about it. While Achilles fights for personal glory, asking, what is glory worth? And Odysseus fights for survival, asking, how do I return home to what matters? Aeneas represents duty and legacy. He asks a totally different question. What must I sacrifice to build the future? This makes him the absolute archetype of the modern leader who carries the burden of building something intended to outlast them. The future of Rome is secured, yes. It's presented as this glorious destiny. But Virgil brilliantly refuses to give us a clean, easy, triumphant conclusion. Organizations, nations, and businesses love to tell heroic, completely sanitized stories about their success. But mature leadership requires looking right beneath that success. It requires asking who paid the price. True greatness demands that we examine not just the shiny, pristine outcomes, but the heavy human costs that paved the way. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful thought. Aeneas succeeds, absolutely, But his greatness comes from carrying responsibility when carrying it deeply hurts. It leaves us to wonder about our own ambitions. When you set out to build something far greater than yourself, you have to ask, what do you owe to your destiny, and what does that destiny owe to the people you inevitably sacrifice along the way? It's a heavy toll, but understanding it is the true burden of leadership. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep building, but never ever forget the cost.